St. Mary's General Hospital, a beacon of medical excellence in an affluent suburban community, was about to face an unexpected challenge. When Angela Parker, a talented black nurse, joined their staff, she had no idea of the deep-seated prejudices she would encounter. As tensions mounted and conflicts escalated, a seemingly ordinary patient named Thomas Edwards watched silently from his hospital bed. But Mr. Edwards wasn't just any patient, and his presence was about to change everything. What hidden power did this mysterious patient hold, and how could one nurse's struggle become the catalyst for institutional change? Let's find out. But before we dive into this story, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy this tale with unexpected twists and moments of justice, don't forget to subscribe. The pristine halls of St. Mary's General Hospital gleamed under the fluorescent lights as Angela Parker took her first steps inside. The air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and an underlying current of tension that made her stomach churn. Despite her nervousness, Angela straightened her back and lifted her chin, determined to make a good first impression. As she approached the nurses' station, Angela noticed the sudden hush that fell over the area. Conversations dwindled to whispers, and eyes darted away from her as if afraid to make contact. She swallowed hard, pushing down the familiar feeling of isolation that threatened to overwhelm her. "Excuse me," Angela said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'm Angela Parker, the new nurse. Could you direct me to the head nurse's office?" A blonde nurse looked up, her blue eyes widening slightly before a practiced smile spread across her face. "Of course," she replied, her tone polite but cool. "Down the hall, third door on the right." Angela nodded her thanks and made her way down the corridor, acutely aware of the eyes following her progress. The click of her sensible shoes echoed in the silence, each step feeling like a thunderclap in the unnaturally quiet space. As she neared the office, a tall, distinguished-looking man in a white coat emerged from a nearby room. His salt-and-pepper hair and authoritative bearing marked him as a senior doctor. Angela's heart quickened with hope. Perhaps this would be her chance to make a positive connection. "Good morning, Doctor," she said, offering a warm smile. "I'm Angela Parker, the new nurse starting today. It's a pleasure to meet you." The doctor's steel-grey eyes swept over her, his expression impassive. "Dr. William Greaves," he replied curtly. "I trust you've been properly oriented to our protocols." Before Angela could respond, Dr. Greaves continued, "We maintain very high standards here at St. Mary's. I hope you're prepared to meet them." Without waiting for a reply, he brushed past her, leaving Angela standing alone in the hallway, her outstretched hand slowly falling to her side. The interaction left her feeling deflated, but Angela refused to let it dampen her spirits. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and knocked on the head nurse's door. As she waited for a response, Angela's mind drifted back to her days in nursing school, her mother's words echoing in her ears. "Baby girl," her mother had said, her voice filled with a mixture of pride and concern. "You're going to have to fight twice as hard as everyone else, but don't you ever let them see you sweat. You come from a long line of strong women, and you've got that same strength in you." Angela remembered the late nights studying, the extra hours in the lab, and the constant feeling of having to prove herself. She recalled the subtle dismissals from some professors, the raised eyebrows when she aced an exam, and the whispered comments from classmates questioning whether she truly belonged. But through it all, Angela had persevered. She graduated at the top of her class, her determination and skill silencing even her harshest critics. Now, standing in the halls of St. Mary's, Angela drew strength from those memories. She had overcome obstacles before, and she would do so again. The door opened, revealing a middle-aged woman with a stern expression. "Miss Parker, I presume," she said, her tone clipped. "Come in. We have a lot to cover, and I expect you to keep up." As Angela followed the head nurse into the office, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into more than just a new job. The air in the hospital seemed charged with an undercurrent of tension, a silent storm brewing beneath the surface of professional smiles and sterile efficiency. Little did Angela know that her presence would soon become the catalyst for change in the halls of St. Mary's, challenging long-held prejudices and exposing the toxic culture that lurked behind its prestigious facade. The rest of Angela's first day passed in a whirlwind of orientations, introductions, and a mountain of paperwork. As she made her way through the hospital, she couldn't help but notice the subtle ways in which she was excluded. Conversations would drop to a hush as she approached, only to resume in hushed tones once she passed. Her attempts at small talk with fellow nurses were met with polite but distant responses, leaving her feeling like an outsider in what should have been a collaborative environment. By the time her shift ended, Angela was mentally and emotionally exhausted. As she gathered her things from her locker, she overheard two nurses talking in hushed tones around the corner. "Did you see the new hire?" one whispered. "Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking," the other replied. "This isn't exactly the neighborhood for, you know." Angela's hand froze on her locker door, her heart sinking. She had hoped that the initial coolness was just first-day jitters, but now the reality of her situation was becoming painfully clear. This wasn't just a new job. It was going to be a daily battle against prejudice and preconceptions. As she left the hospital, the weight of the day pressed down on her shoulders. Angela made her way to the bus stop, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. The excitement she had felt that morning had been replaced by a gnawing sense of doubt and isolation. Sitting on the hard plastic bench, Angela pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number. After 2 rings, a warm, comforting voice answered. "Hey, baby girl, how was your first day?" At the sound of her mother's voice, Angela felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She took a shaky breath, determined not to break down in public. "It was challenging, Mama," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line before her mother spoke again, her voice filled with understanding and strength. "Angela Marie Parker, you listen to me. You've worked too hard to let anyone make you feel less than. Remember who you are and where you come from. You're not just there for yourself, you're there for every little black girl who dreams of being in those halls one day." Angela closed her eyes, letting her mother's words wash over her. "I know, Mama, it's just, I didn't expect it to be this hard." "Nothing worth doing is ever easy, baby," her mother replied, "but you've got the strength of generations behind you. Hold your head high, do your job better than anyone else, and don't you dare let them see you falter. You hear me?" "Yes, Mama," Angela said, feeling a renewed sense of determination. "I hear you." As she ended the call, Angela noticed a sleek black Mercedes slow down as it passed the bus stop. Through the tinted windows, she caught a glimpse of Dr. Greaves. His eyes locked on her for a moment before the car sped away. Angela squared her shoulders, her mother's words echoing in her mind. She may be facing an uphill battle, but she was far from alone. With the strength of her family behind her and her own determination to prove herself, Angela knew she could weather whatever challenges St. Mary's threw her way. As the bus approached, Angela stood ready to face another day. Little did she know that her presence at St. Mary's was about to set in motion a chain of events that would challenge the very foundations of the hospital's culture, exposing long-hidden prejudices and forcing a reckoning that was long overdue. The following weeks at St. Mary's General Hospital unfolded like a slow-burning fuse, each day adding another layer of tension to Angela Parker's already challenging work environment. The initial coolness she had experienced on her first day had evolved into a more insidious form of exclusion, one that was harder to pinpoint, but impossible to ignore. As Angela made her morning rounds, she couldn't help but notice the stark difference in how she was treated compared to her white colleagues. Dr. William Greaves, in particular, seemed to take a perverse pleasure in finding fault with her work, no matter how diligently she performed her duties. "Nurse Parker," Dr. Greaves called out one morning, his voice carrying across the busy nurses' station. "I hope you've familiarized yourself with our protocols by now. We can't afford any mistakes." The emphasis he placed on the word mistakes sent a chill down Angela's spine. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. "Of course, Dr. Greaves, I assure you I'm fully versed in all hospital procedures." Dr. Greaves raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "We'll see about that, won't we? Let's hope you learned everything you need to here." The barely veiled condescension in his tone was not lost on Angela, nor on the other nurses who pretended to be busy with their tasks, while obviously eavesdropping. As Dr. Greaves walked away, Angela could feel the weight of unspoken judgments pressing down on her. Throughout the day, Angela found herself assigned to the most challenging and undesirable tasks. While her white colleagues were given relatively straightforward cases, Angela was repeatedly sent to deal with the most difficult patients and the most complex procedures. "Angela, would you mind taking Mr. Johnson in room 305? A fellow nurse asked, her voice sickly sweet. "He's been a bit challenging today." Angela nodded, knowing full well that challenging was an understatement. Mr. Johnson was known for his racist outbursts and had already driven 2 nurses to tears that week. Yet Angela approached the task with unwavering professionalism, determined to prove her worth. As she entered Mr. Johnson's room, bracing herself for the inevitable tirade, Angela couldn't help but wonder if this assignment was just another way to test her resolve, or worse, to set her up for failure. "What are you doing here?" Mr. Johnson spat as soon as he saw her. "I told them I don't want no colored nurse touching me." Angela took a deep breath, steeling herself against the onslaught of hateful words. "Mr. Johnson, I'm here to check your vitals and change your dressing. I assure you I'm more than qualified to provide your care." As she worked, enduring a constant stream of racial slurs and insults, Angela maintained her composure. She completed her tasks with precision and care, refusing to let Mr. Johnson's bigotry affect the quality of her work. When she finally emerged from the room, Angela found Dr. Greaves waiting in the hallway, a look of feigned concern on his face. "Everything all right in there, Nurse Parker? We heard quite a commotion." Angela met his gaze evenly. "Mr. Johnson's vitals are stable, and his dressing has been changed. Is there anything else you need from me, Dr. Greaves?" For a moment, surprise flickered across the doctor's face, quickly replaced by his usual mask of condescension. "Well, let's hope you can maintain that level of composure with all your patients. We wouldn't want any complaints now, would we?" As Dr. Greaves walked away, Angela couldn't shake the feeling that she had just passed some sort of test, one that she should never have been subjected to in the first place. The rest of Angela's shift passed in a blur of endless tasks and subtle slights. She found herself constantly having to double-check her work, not because she doubted her abilities, but because she knew that even the smallest mistake would be magnified and used against her. As the day wore on, Angela couldn't help but notice how her white colleagues seemed to breeze through their shifts, chatting and laughing while she struggled under the weight of her disproportionate workload. The inequality was glaring, but every time she considered speaking up, the memory of her mother's words held her back. "Don't you dare let them see you falter." By the time her shift ended, Angela was physically and emotionally drained. As she gathered her things from her locker, she overheard 2 nurses whispering nearby. "Can you believe they're making such a big deal about diversity hires?" one said, her voice dripping with disdain. "It's not like they can keep up with the rest of us anyway." Angela's hand froze on her locker door, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted nothing more than to confront them, to defend herself and her abilities. But she knew that any such confrontation would only serve to reinforce their prejudices. Instead, she closed her locker quietly and made her way out of the hospital, her head held high despite the weight of the day pressing down on her shoulders. As Angela waited at the bus stop, the same sleek black Mercedes she had seen before pulled up alongside her. The window rolled down, revealing Dr. Greaves behind the wheel. "Nurse Parker," he called out, his voice dripping with false concern. "Waiting for the bus again? Such a shame. Looks like that's all you can afford on a nurse's salary, isn't it?" Before Angela could respond, Dr. Greaves sped away, leaving her standing there, humiliated and angry. The casual cruelty of his words cut deep, reminding her once again of the uphill battle she faced every day at St. Mary's. As she boarded the bus, Angela's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The excitement and hope she had felt when she first started at St. Mary's seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by a grim determination to survive in this hostile environment. But even as she grappled with the day's events, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that something had to give. The question was, would she be the one to break under the constant pressure, or would her perseverance finally force a change in the toxic culture of St. Mary's? Little did Angela know that an unexpected ally was about to enter her life, one who would help tip the scales in her favor and expose the deep-seated prejudices that had long festered within the walls of St. Mary's General Hospital. As the bus rumbled through the darkening streets, Angela closed her eyes, drawing strength from the memory of her mother's words and the legacy of resilience that ran through her veins. Tomorrow would be another battle, but she was determined to face it head-on, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The next morning, Angela arrived at St. Mary's with renewed determination. She had spent the night reflecting on her experiences and reminding herself of why she became a nurse in the first place, to help people, regardless of their background or her own challenges. As she made her way to the nurses' station, Angela noticed a flurry of activity. Nurses were hurriedly preparing a room, and there was an air of anticipation that she hadn't felt before. "What's going on?" Angela asked one of her colleagues, curious about the commotion. The nurse, momentarily forgetting her usual coolness towards Angela, replied excitedly, "We've got a VIP patient coming in. Some big shot who got into a skiing accident. Both arms broken from what I heard." Before Angela could inquire further, Dr. Greaves appeared, his face set in a stern expression. "Nurse Parker," he said, his voice clipped, "I need you to handle the new admission in room 412, Mr. Thomas Edwards. He's had a severe skiing accident and both his arms are broken. I expect you to provide him with the utmost care and attention." Angela nodded, recognizing the assignment for what it was. Another test. "Of course, Dr. Greaves. I'll see to it right away." As she made her way to room 412, Angela couldn't shake the feeling that this assignment was different somehow. The air of importance surrounding this patient made her wonder if there was more to this situation than met the eye. Entering the room, Angela was greeted by the sight of a middle-aged man lying in bed, both arms encased in casts. Despite his injuries, there was an air of quiet authority about him that Angela immediately noticed. "Good morning, Mr. Edwards," she said, approaching the bed with a warm smile. "I'm Nurse Angela Parker, and I'll be taking care of you during your stay with us." Mr. Edwards looked up at her, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Good morning, Nurse Parker," he replied, his voice surprisingly strong given his condition. "I appreciate your help. I must say I didn't expect to end up here after my skiing accident." As Angela began to check his vitals and assess his condition, she couldn't help but notice how Mr. Edwards watched her every move with keen interest. Unlike some of the other patients she had dealt with, there was no hint of prejudice or disdain in his gaze, only a thoughtful curiosity. "You seem very competent, Nurse Parker," Mr. Edwards commented as she adjusted his IV. "How long have you been working at St. Mary's?" Angela paused, surprised by the genuine interest in his tone. "I've been here for a few weeks now, sir," she replied carefully. "It's been quite an experience so far." Mr. Edwards raised an eyebrow at her diplomatic response. "I see," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "And how have you found the hospital? Living up to its prestigious reputation, I hope." Angela hesitated, unsure of how to answer. She was saved from responding by the arrival of Dr. Greaves, who burst into the room with an overly cheerful demeanor that Angela had never seen before. "Mr. Edwards!" Dr. Greaves exclaimed, his voice dripping with false warmth. "I trust Nurse Parker has been taking good care of you. We only assign our best staff to our most distinguished patients." Angela fought to keep her expression neutral, knowing full well that Dr. Greaves had never shown such faith in her abilities before. Mr. Edwards, however, seemed to pick up on the inconsistency. "Indeed, Dr. Greaves," he replied, his eyes flicking between the doctor and Angela. Nurse Parker has been exemplary. I was just asking her about her experiences here at St. Mary's." Dr. Greaves's smile faltered for a moment before he quickly recovered. "Well, I'm sure she'll tell you it's been nothing short of excellent. We pride ourselves on our inclusive and supportive environment here at St. Mary's." Angela felt a surge of anger at Dr. Greaves's blatant hypocrisy, but she maintained her professional demeanor. Mr. Edwards, however, seemed to sense the underlying tension. "Is that so?" he mused, his eyes never leaving Angela's face. "Well, I look forward to experiencing this supportive environment firsthand during my stay." As Dr. Greaves launched into a detailed explanation of Mr. Edwards's treatment plan, Angela couldn't shake the feeling that she had just witnessed something significant. The way Mr. Edwards had looked at her, the pointed nature of his questions. It was as if he was seeing beyond the surface of St. Mary's polished facade. Over the next few days, Angela found herself spending more time in Mr. Edwards's room than with any other patient. Despite his injuries, he was alert and engaging, often asking her questions about her work and her background. Unlike many of the other patients and staff, Mr. Edwards seemed genuinely interested in her responses, never showing a hint of the prejudice she had come to expect. One afternoon, as Angela was changing Mr. Edwards's bandages, she overheard a conversation outside the room that made her blood run cold. "I don't care what Dr. Greaves says," a nurse's voice hissed. "I don't trust that Parker woman with our VIP patient. Who knows what she might do?" "I know," another voice agreed, "but we can't say anything. They'll just accuse us of being racist." Angela's hands trembled slightly as she finished her task, the weight of the constant suspicion and mistrust bearing down on her. Mr. Edwards, ever observant, noticed her distress. "Is everything all right, Nurse Parker?" he asked, his voice gentle but probing. Angela forced a smile. "Of course, Mr. Edwards. Just concentrating on getting these bandages just right." Mr. Edwards was silent for a moment, his eyes studying her face. "You know," he said finally, "I've always believed that a person's true character is revealed not in how they treat their superiors, but in how they treat those they perceive as beneath them." Angela looked up, startled by the pointed nature of his comment. Mr. Edwards held her gaze, a knowing look in his eyes. "I've seen a lot in my time, Nurse Parker, and I can tell you the view from this bed has been illuminating." Before Angela could respond, Dr. Greaves entered the room, cutting their conversation short. As she left the room, Angela couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Edwards was more than just a VIP patient. His words and actions hinted at a deeper understanding of the dynamics at play in St. Mary's, and for the first time since she started working there, Angela felt a glimmer of hope. Little did she know that Mr. Edwards's presence was about to set in motion a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of St. Mary's General Hospital, exposing the deep-seated prejudices that had long festered beneath its pristine surface. As the days wore on, Angela found herself increasingly isolated at St. Mary's. The initial coolness from her colleagues had evolved into outright hostility, with whispered comments and pointed glares following her wherever she went. Dr. Greaves, emboldened by the lack of consequences for his behavior, became more overt in his attempts to undermine her. One morning, as Angela was reviewing patient charts at the nurses' station, Dr. Greaves approached her with a stack of files. "Nurse Parker," he said, his voice dripping with false concern, "I need you to handle these cases today. They're particularly challenging. I trust you're up to the task?" Angela looked at the pile, immediately recognizing it as nearly double the workload of her colleagues. She met Dr. Greaves's gaze steadily, refusing to show any sign of intimidation. "Of course, Dr. Greaves, I'll see to it right away." As Dr. Greaves walked away, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth, Angela heard him mutter under his breath, "Let's see how she handles this." Throughout the day, Angela found herself running from one difficult case to another, barely having time to catch her breath. The patients assigned to her were among the most demanding in the hospital, many with complex medical needs or challenging personalities. Despite the overwhelming workload, Angela refused to let her standards slip. She approached each patient with the same level of care and professionalism, even as exhaustion began to set in. However, the constant pressure was taking its toll, both physically and emotionally. As she rushed to respond to yet another call light, Angela overheard two of her colleagues whispering nearby. "Can you believe they're letting her handle all these critical cases?" one nurse said, her voice laced with disdain. "It's like they're just waiting for her to mess up." "I know," the other replied, "but you have to admit it's impressive how she keeps going. I would have cracked by now." Angela felt a mix of anger and hurt wash over her. The realization that her colleagues were not only aware of the unfair treatment, but were actively watching to see if she would fail, was almost too much to bear. As the day wore on, Angela found herself making more frequent trips to Mr. Edwards's room. Unlike the rest of the hospital, his room had become a sort of sanctuary for her, a place where she could catch her breath and feel, if only for a moment, that someone saw her true worth. "Nurse Parker," Mr. Edwards greeted her as she entered his room for a routine check. "You look exhausted. Is everything all right?" Angela managed a weak smile. "Just a busy day, Mr. Edwards. Nothing I can't handle." Mr. Edwards studied her face for a moment, his eyes filled with concern. "You know," he said carefully, "there's a difference between handling something and thriving. From what I've seen, you're more than capable of the latter." His words, though kind, only served to highlight the stark contrast between how Mr. Edwards treated her and how the rest of the hospital staff did. Angela felt a lump form in her throat, the weight of her isolation threatening to overwhelm her. "Thank you, Mr. Edwards," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "I appreciate your kindness." As she turned to leave, Mr. Edwards called out to her. "Nurse Parker," he said, his voice filled with a quiet authority that made her pause. "Remember, sometimes the greatest strength lies in knowing when to speak up." Angela left the room, her mind whirling with the implications of Mr. Edwards's words. As she made her way back to the nurses' station, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Little did she know that the next day would bring a series of events that would push her to her limits and force a confrontation that had been brewing since her first day at St. Mary's. The following morning, Angela arrived at work to find the hospital in a state of heightened activity. Rumors were swirling about a high-stakes emergency operation scheduled for later that day, with several hospital board members and important visitors expected to observe. As Angela began her rounds, she couldn't help but notice the nervous energy permeating the hospital. Nurses and doctors alike seemed on edge, the pressure of the upcoming operation weighing heavily on everyone's minds. Midway through her morning duties, Dr. Greaves approached Angela, a glint in his eye that immediately put her on guard. "Nurse Parker," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "we need you to assist in the emergency operation this afternoon. It's a critical case. I trust you're prepared to handle it." Angela felt a mix of surprise and suspicion wash over her. Being asked to assist in such a high-profile operation was usually an honor, but coming from Dr. Greaves, she couldn't help but wonder if there was an ulterior motive. "Of course, Dr. Greaves," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'll be ready." As Dr. Greaves walked away, Angela overheard him muttering to another doctor, "Let's see how she handles the pressure. This should be interesting." The hours leading up to the operation were a blur of preparation and anticipation. Angela threw herself into her work, double and triple checking everything to ensure she was as prepared as possible for whatever challenges the operation might bring. As she scrubbed in for the surgery, Angela couldn't help but notice the skeptical looks from some of the other staff members. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, "Don't you dare let them see you falter." The operation began, and Angela found herself working alongside Dr. Greaves and several other senior staff members. The tension in the room was palpable, with the knowledge that important observers were watching their every move, adding an extra layer of pressure. Despite the challenging circumstances, Angela remained focused, her movements precise and efficient. She anticipated the needs of the surgeons, handing them instruments before they even had to ask, her years of training and experience shining through. However, as the operation progressed, Angela noticed something that made her heart race. Dr. Greaves, usually so confident and sure, seemed to be hesitating. His hands trembled slightly as he prepared to make a critical incision. In that split second, Angela realized that Dr. Greaves was about to make a potentially life-threatening mistake. Without hesitation, she spoke up. "Dr. Greaves," she said, her voice clear and steady, "perhaps we should consider approaching from a different angle. The patient's anatomy suggests it might be safer." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Angela. Dr. Greaves looked at her, a mix of surprise and anger flashing across his face. For a moment, Angela thought he might dismiss her suggestion outright. But then, almost imperceptibly, Dr. Greaves nodded. He adjusted his approach, following Angela's suggestion. As they continued the operation, it became clear that her intervention had likely saved the patient's life. As the surgery concluded successfully, Angela could feel the weight of many eyes upon her. Some looked at her with newfound respect, while others, including Dr. Greaves, seemed to be seething with barely contained anger. As they began to clean up, Dr. Greaves turned to Angela, his voice low and menacing. "Nurse Parker, I need to see you in private, immediately." Angela followed Dr. Greaves out of the operating room, her heart pounding. She knew that speaking up had been the right thing to do, but she also knew that it might have just cost her her job. As they entered a private room, Angela was surprised to see that it was Mr. Edwards's room. In her focus on the operation, she had forgotten that he was still a patient in the hospital. Dr. Greaves, however, seemed too angry to notice or care about their location. As soon as the door closed behind them, he rounded on Angela, his face red with fury. "How dare you question my judgment in there?" he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? You're lucky I don't have you fired on the spot for such insubordination." Angela stood her ground, her voice calm but firm. "Dr. Greaves, I was simply doing my job, the patient's safety." "Your job," Dr. Greaves interrupted, his voice rising. "Your job is to follow orders, not to think you know better than your superiors. This is exactly why people like you don't belong in a prestigious institution like St. Mary's. You're here because of some misguided attempt at diversity, not because you have any real skill or knowledge." As Dr. Greaves continued his tirade, becoming more openly racist and hostile with each passing moment, Angela felt a mix of anger and despair wash over her. Everything she had endured, every slight and microaggression, seemed to pale in comparison to this blatant display of prejudice. Just as Angela was about to respond, a voice cut through the room, stopping Dr. Greaves mid-sentence. "Dr. Greaves," Mr. Edwards said, his voice filled with a quiet authority that neither of them had heard before. "I believe you've forgotten where you are, and who you're speaking to." Both Angela and Dr. Greaves turned, startled to see Mr. Edwards sitting up in his bed, a look of controlled anger on his face. "Mr. Edwards," Dr. Greaves stammered, his face paling as he realized the gravity of his mistake. I didn't realize you were awake. I apologize for disturbing you." "Oh, I'm very much awake, Dr. Greaves," Mr. Edwards replied, his eyes narrowing. "And I've been awake for quite some time. Long enough to observe the disgraceful way you and others in this hospital have been treating Nurse Parker." Angela stood frozen, unable to believe what she was hearing. Mr. Edwards, the quiet, unassuming patient, was suddenly radiating an aura of power and authority that filled the room. "Mr. Edwards," Dr. Greaves began, his voice trembling slightly, "I assure you there's been a misunderstanding." "There's been no misunderstanding," Mr. Edwards cut him off sharply. "What I've witnessed during my stay here is a clear pattern of discrimination and harassment, and it ends now." As Mr. Edwards spoke, the realization dawned on both Angela and Dr. Greaves that he was far more than just a VIP patient. The way he carried himself, the authority in his voice, it was clear that Mr. Edwards wielded significant power. Who are you?" Dr. Greaves asked, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. Mr. Edwards smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Someone who has the power to make or break this hospital's future. And right now, Dr. Greaves, I'm not feeling very inclined to support an institution that allows such blatant racism and unprofessional behavior. As the gravity of the situation sank in, Angela felt a mix of emotions wash over her. Relief that someone had finally witnessed and acknowledged the treatment she had been enduring. Anger at the injustice she had faced, and a glimmer of hope that perhaps finally things might change. Little did any of them know that this confrontation was about to set in motion a series of events that would shake St. Mary's General Hospital to its very core, exposing long-hidden prejudices and forcing a reckoning that was long overdue. The tension in Mr. Edwards's room was palpable as the full weight of his words sank in. Dr. Greaves, his face ashen, struggled to regain his composure. Angela stood silently, her mind reeling from the sudden turn of events. Mr. Edwards, now fully sitting up in his bed, fixed Dr. Greaves with a steely gaze. "I think it's time we had a frank discussion about the culture of this hospital, don't you?" Before Dr. Greaves could respond, there was a knock at the door. A nervous-looking nurse poked her head in. "Dr. Greaves, the hospital administrator is looking for you. It's urgent." Dr. Greaves looked between Mr. Edwards and the nurse, clearly torn. Finally, he nodded stiffly. "We'll continue this discussion later, Mr. Edwards. Nurse Parker, you're dismissed for now." As Dr. Greaves hurried out of the room, Angela found herself alone with Mr. Edwards. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "Nurse Parker," Mr. Edwards finally said, his voice gentler now, "I think it's time I properly introduced myself. My name is Thomas Edwards, and I'm the CEO of Healthcare United, one of the largest healthcare conglomerates in the country." Angela's eyes widened in shock. Healthcare United was a powerhouse in the medical world, known for its influence and resources. Suddenly, Mr. Edwards's earlier comments about having the power to make or break the hospital made perfect sense. "Mr. Edwards, Angela began, unsure of what to say. "Please sit down," Mr. Edwards said, gesturing to a chair beside his bed. "I think we have a lot to discuss." Over the next hour, Mr. Edwards revealed that while his stay at St. Mary's had been unplanned due to his skiing accident, it had opened his eyes to the deep-seated issues within the hospital. "I came here as a patient, expecting nothing more than quality medical care," Mr. Edwards explained. "Instead, I've witnessed a culture of discrimination and unprofessionalism that goes against everything I believe in as a healthcare leader." He went on to describe how he had observed the subtle and not-so-subtle discrimination Angela had faced, the microaggressions, and the overall toxic culture that seemed to permeate the hospital. "Your experience, Nurse Parker, is unfortunately not unique," Mr. Edwards said, his voice filled with a mix of anger and determination. "But it is unacceptable, and it ends now." As they talked, Angela felt a weight lifting off her shoulders. For the first time since she started at St. Mary's, she felt truly seen and heard. Mr. Edwards listened intently as she shared her experiences, his face growing more serious with each revelation. "Thank you for your honesty, Nurse Parker," Mr. Edwards said when she finished. "Your resilience in the face of such adversity is commendable, but it's time for systemic change, not just individual perseverance." Just then, there was another knock at the door. The hospital administrator, looking flustered, entered the room. "Mr. Edwards," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I understand there's been some concern about our hospital's practices. I assure you, we take these matters very seriously." Mr. Edwards raised an eyebrow. "Do you? Because from what I've observed, the only thing taken seriously here is maintaining an outdated and discriminatory status quo." The administrator paled, clearly unprepared for such direct criticism. I'm not sure I understand. We have diversity initiatives in place." "Initiatives are not enough," Mr. Edwards cut her off. "What you need is a complete overhaul of your hospital's culture, and it starts at the top." Over the next few hours, Mr. Edwards laid out his demands for change. He called for a full investigation into the discriminatory practices at St. Mary's, mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all staff, and a revamp of the hospital's hiring and promotion practices. "And as for Dr. Greaves," Mr. Edwards said, his voice hard, "I expect his behavior to be thoroughly investigated. His actions today were not just unprofessional, they were discriminatory and potentially dangerous to patient care." The administrator, realizing the gravity of the situation, nodded numbly. "Of course, Mr. Edwards. We'll begin implementing these changes immediately." As the day wore on, word spread throughout the hospital about Mr. Edwards's true identity and the changes he was demanding. The atmosphere in the halls of St. Mary's was electric, a mix of fear, anticipation, and, for some, hope. Angela, still processing everything that had happened, found herself at the center of attention. Colleagues who had previously ignored or belittled her now approached her, some offering awkward apologies, others seeking her insight on the coming changes. As her shift ended, Angela made her way to Mr. Edwards's room one last time. She found him sitting up, looking tired but satisfied. "Nurse Parker," he greeted her with a warm smile, "I hope you don't mind, but I've recommended you for a position on the newly formed Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Your experiences and insights will be invaluable as we work to transform St. Mary's." Angela felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, hope, and a renewed sense of purpose. "Thank you, Mr. Edwards," she said, her voice thick with feeling, "for everything." Mr. Edwards shook his head. "No thank you, Nurse Parker. Your courage and professionalism in the face of adversity have been inspiring. You've reminded me why I got into healthcare in the first place, to make a difference in people's lives." As Angela left the hospital that evening, she couldn't help but feel that a new chapter was beginning, not just for her, but for St. Mary's as a whole. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time since she started working there, Angela felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Little did she know that the changes set in motion that day would have far-reaching consequences, not just for St. Mary's, but for the entire healthcare industry. The story of a dedicated nurse and an unexpectedly influential patient was about to become a catalyst for change on a scale neither of them could have imagined. The following days at St. Mary's General Hospital were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. The revelation of Mr. Edwards's true identity and his demands for change had sent shockwaves through the entire institution. The once pristine facade of the hospital had been cracked, exposing the deep-seated issues that had long festered beneath the surface. Early Monday morning, Angela arrived at the hospital to find a flurry of activity. News vans were parked outside, reporters clamoring for statements from anyone willing to speak. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, with staff huddled in small groups whispering frantically. As Angela made her way to the nurses' station, she noticed Dr. Greaves being escorted to the administration offices by security. Their eyes met briefly, and Angela saw a mix of anger and fear in the doctor's gaze before he was led away. "Angela!" a voice called out. She turned to see Sarah, one of the nurses who had previously been cold towards her, approaching with an awkward smile. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for how I've treated you. I didn't realize—" Angela nodded, accepting the apology but unsure how to respond. Before she could say anything, an announcement came over the hospital's PA system. "All staff members are required to attend an emergency meeting in the main auditorium in 30 minutes. Attendance is mandatory." The auditorium was packed when Angela arrived. She found a seat near the back, acutely aware of the curious glances and whispers that followed her. At the front of the room, she could see Mr. Edwards, now dressed in a sharp suit despite his arm casts, speaking quietly with the hospital administrator and several other official-looking individuals. As the room settled, Mr. Edwards stepped up to the podium. His presence commanded immediate attention, the whispers dying down to a tense silence. "Good morning," he began, his voice firm and authoritative. "For those who don't know me, I am Thomas Edwards, CEO of Healthcare United. Over the past week, I have been a patient here at St. Mary's, recovering from a skiing accident. During this time, I've had the opportunity to observe the day-to-day operations and culture of this hospital. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. What I witnessed was deeply troubling. I saw a culture of discrimination, bias, and unprofessional behavior that has no place in modern healthcare. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some staff members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others nodded in agreement. "Let me be clear," Mr. Edwards continued. "The events I witnessed, particularly the treatment of Nurse Angela Parker, are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a systemic problem that has been allowed to persist for far too long." Angela felt all eyes in the room turn to her. She sat up straighter, meeting the gazes of her colleagues with quiet dignity. Mr. Edwards went on to outline the changes that would be implemented immediately. These included a thorough investigation into discriminatory practices, mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all staff, and a complete overhaul of the hospital's hiring and promotion processes. Furthermore, Mr. Edwards added, his voice taking on a harder edge, those found to have engaged in discriminatory behavior will face serious consequences. This includes Dr. William Greaves, who has been suspended pending a full investigation into his conduct. The announcement sent another wave of whispers through the crowd. Angela could see some of Dr. Greaves's longtime supporters looking shocked and angry, while others seemed relieved. "I know these changes may be difficult for some of you," Mr. Edwards continued. "Change often is, but let me be clear. This is not just about doing the right thing morally. It's about providing the best possible care for our patients. A diverse, inclusive, and respectful workplace leads to better outcomes for everyone." As Mr. Edwards concluded his speech, he made one final announcement that sent a jolt through the room. "Lastly, I want to introduce you to the person who will be leading many of these changes. Nurse Angela Parker has agreed to take on the role of Chief Diversity Officer at St. Mary's. Her experiences and insights will be invaluable as we work to transform this institution." Angela felt a mix of shock, pride, and nervousness wash over her as applause filled the room. She hadn't expected this announcement, having only discussed joining the Diversity and Inclusion Committee with Mr. Edwards. As she made her way to the front of the room at Mr. Edwards's beckoning, she could see a range of emotions on her colleagues' faces: surprise, respect, and in some cases, lingering resentment. Standing at the podium, Angela took a deep breath before addressing the room. "Thank you, Mr. Edwards. To all of you, I want to say this. I stand before you not as an adversary, but as a colleague who believes in the potential of St. Mary's and everyone in this room. The road ahead won't be easy, but I'm committed to working with all of you to create a hospital where every staff member feels valued and every patient receives the best possible care, regardless of their background." As Angela spoke, she could see the impact of her words. Some staff members nodded in agreement, while others looked thoughtful. Even those who had been openly hostile to her in the past seemed to be listening intently. After the meeting, Angela found herself surrounded by colleagues offering congratulations, apologies, and in some cases, tentative olive branches. The atmosphere in the hospital had shifted dramatically. While there was still tension and uncertainty, there was also a palpable sense of hope and possibility. As the day wore on, Angela worked alongside Mr. Edwards and the hospital administration to begin implementing the promised changes. It was exhausting but exhilarating work, and for the first time since she started at St. Mary's, Angela felt like she was truly making a difference. That evening, as Angela prepared to leave the hospital, she found Mr. Edwards waiting for her near the exit. "Nurse Parker," he said with a warm smile, "or should I say Chief Diversity Officer Parker, how are you holding up?" Angela let out a tired laugh. "It's been quite a day, Mr. Edwards. I'm still processing everything, to be honest." Mr. Edwards nodded understandingly. "I know it's a lot to take in, but I want you to know that I have full confidence in your ability to lead these changes. Your resilience and integrity in the face of adversity are exactly what St. Mary's needs right now." As they walked out of the hospital together, Mr. Edwards turned to Angela with a serious expression. "You should know that what's happening here at St. Mary's is just the beginning. I plan to implement similar changes across all of Healthcare United's facilities. Your story, Angela, has the potential to spark a revolution in how we approach diversity and inclusion in healthcare. Angela felt the weight of this responsibility settle on her shoulders, but rather than feeling burdened, she felt empowered. I'm ready for the challenge, Mr. Edwards. Together, we can make real, lasting change. As they parted ways, Angela couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in just a few short days. From feeling isolated and on the verge of giving up, she now stood at the forefront of a movement that had the potential to transform not just St. Mary's, but the entire healthcare industry. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles and resistance from those resistant to change. But as Angela looked back at the hospital, she felt a surge of determination. This was more than just a job now. It was a calling, a chance to ensure that no other healthcare professional would have to endure what she had gone through. With renewed purpose, Angela set off into the evening, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. The transformation of St. Mary's had begun, and with it, a new chapter in the fight for equality and inclusion in healthcare. In the months following Mr. Edwards's revelation, St. Mary's General Hospital underwent a dramatic transformation. Under Angela's leadership as Chief Diversity Officer, and with Mr. Edwards's continued support, the once toxic culture began to shift towards inclusivity and respect. The mandatory diversity and inclusion training, initially met with resistance, gradually opened eyes and changed hearts. Dr. Greaves, following a thorough investigation, was dismissed from his position, sending a clear message that discriminatory behavior would no longer be tolerated. As the changes at St. Mary's gained attention, Angela found herself in demand as a speaker at medical conferences and diversity seminars. 1 year after the fateful day of Mr. Edwards's intervention, she stood before a packed auditorium at a national healthcare conference. "A year ago," Angela began, "I was a nurse on the verge of giving up. Today I stand before you as living proof that change is possible, that one voice can make a difference." She shared St. Mary's story of transformation, not shying away from the challenges they had faced, but also highlighting the victories. The lives touched, the minds changed, and the culture shifted. After the conference, Mr. Edwards, now fully recovered from his injuries, approached Angela with a warm smile. "Angela," he greeted her, "you've come a long way from the nurse I met a year ago." They discussed the progress at St. Mary's and its ripple effects across the healthcare industry. Mr. Edwards shared that several other hospitals in the Healthcare United network had begun implementing similar programs. "You know, Angela," Mr. Edwards said, "when I checked into St. Mary's after my skiing accident, I never could have imagined the journey it would set in motion. You've not only transformed St. Mary's, but reignited my own passion for this work." As Angela prepared to return to St. Mary's, she reflected on her incredible journey. From an isolated, frustrated nurse to a leader and change-maker, she had come so far. The work was far from over, but Angela felt a sense of hope and determination stronger than ever before. Arriving back at St. Mary's, Angela was greeted by Sarah, once a cold colleague, now a strong ally. The hospital buzzed with new energy, staff members collaborating and communicating in ways they never had before. In the main lobby, Angela paused before a new mural depicting a diverse group of healthcare professionals working together. A plaque below read, "Diversity is our strength, inclusion is our commitment, compassion is our calling." As she settled into her office, ready to tackle new challenges, Angela smiled. The transformation of St. Mary's was just the beginning. The real work of changing hearts, minds, and entire systems was ongoing, and she was ready for it all, committed to fighting for a truly inclusive healthcare system, one day at a time. What moment in Angela's journey resonated with you the most? Was it her perseverance in the face of discrimination, or perhaps Mr. Edwards's unexpected intervention? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to my channel. I pour my heart into crafting these heartwarming stories for you, and your support is what keeps me going. I appreciate having you on this journey.